Okay, first of all, Zach, how many F's and N's are in your last name?
There are two F's, and a lot of people spell Hoffman with two N's at the end. Um, I think those people are a little bit extra, um, and I think maybe we just kind of threw one letter off the boat to lighten it on the way here. So there you go.
Where did the boat come from? Scotland? What is Hoffman? What does it mean?
Oh man, that's so
That
German.
is a great question. None of the generations of Hoffmans have been able to answer that fully, and a lot of people have asked that. Not just Hoffmans, but just people who have observed us out in the wild. But I would say probably German. Well, definitely German, but there's a little bit of Scottish in it as well. So yeah, that's and there's probably other nationalities going on in here too. So, yep.
Are you related to David Hasselhoff?
No, um, no. And so I was asked once if I was related to Oswald Hoffman, the Lutheran speaker. Not related to him either. I had a shut-in once who knew him growing up and delightfully referred to him as a chunky little boy. So,
And how did she refer to you?
is that editable?
There you go.
No, that's just fine.
Okay, good, good. And so I did listen to this to kind of figure out my level of sarcasm for you guys. Um, no, I don't know how she referred to me. Uh, and so, I mean, when in my presence, she just called me pastor. But obviously, when you're gone, I mean, anything is possible. So, yeah.
That's how it works with clergy. People talk really nice about us behind our backs. I would
All the
I would
time.
never compliment the pastor on a sermon to his face.
What is it? Do you think it's piety? Do you think it's like, oh, I don't want him to. He would just say something. He'd say something like, "Well, to God alone be the glory," and so like I don't want to hurt him, and so not even bother saying it. What do you think? Or is it a sense that pastors are vain and you don't want to puff up their egos any further? What do you think?
Yes.
Both. Yes.
Yeah. But so there's three of us here. So that means that probably somebody's talking about us nicely right now, even as this is being recorded. You know.
It's probably
So
you. That's just to be honest.
certainly I do enough to get that. I mean, you're not doing the job right at some point if that's not happening, right? Uh, so
My favorite story is in Fairhaven. People would go up to Pastor Buchs and say, "Oh, that pastor, he was a theologian," referring to a pastor who served in the past, and
Right.
meaning, what about you, Pastor?
Yeah, I took that to heart. Tried to become more theological. It's working. Can you tell?
Now, Zach, you went to Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. David and I went to Concordia Theological Seminary, which, according to Heath Curtis, means we're the seminary with a chip on our shoulder.
yes.
And- oh man.
You
Hey,
just little
hey,
broed
I got a
yourself.
question for you. I think we might get some more information about Pastor Hoffman here in a moment, but I'm curious because you were given the choice of which chapter of Genesis you wanted to discuss, and you chose Genesis chapter 15. So
Mhm.
why would you choose Genesis 15?
There is a lot of stuff that just gets started in Genesis 15. Plus, I love talking about animals being cut in half. Who doesn't? So there's that. Um, but there's a lot I think that's foundational to the rest of the story of Scripture as it's going to unfold after. Plus, it's hot on the heels of Melchizedek, and that's a little fascinating context. And I think a lot of Genesis 15 flows out, of course, of Genesis 14, which is why it's Genesis 14, and 15 follows because it's a story. Um, but
Checks out.
yeah, yeah.
Now, this is
So
good. This is good. We
I am blowing you guys away right now.
it's good to ease into things, Zach.
Yeah.
It's really this is just right. This is perfect.
Yeah.
We in the 1 year lectionary had Genesis 15 yesterday on Trinity 1. Do you know
Jealous.
which gospel lesson Josh, do you know which gospel lesson goes with Genesis 15? You'll
So
love it.
you said Trinity 1, so what's the gospel lesson for yesterday?
Hmm.
Yeah,
So the Old
it's
Testament
the
lesson is Genesis
it's
15.
yeah, I mean it's rich man and Lazarus, isn't it?
Right. And I hadn't realized it until you told me several weeks ago as we were recording that Eliezer is the Hebrew for Lazarus. And of course, as you glance at the end of Genesis 14, Abraham's a rich man, right? So it's like this confluence of all of these things. It's just fresh on my mind. So God calls Abram on Trinity 1.
I loved how you said we. So in John 3, right, we speak of what we know, and that's like the divine we. So when you say we are on the 1 year lectionary, is that the divine we?
Yeah, that's exactly. Well, certainly not the two of you. So,
Sorry, we just happen to use
I mean,
the
do you
Trinitarian
even use a
lectionary.
lectionary, Zach? I can't remember.
I do, although there's that's not without some scandal, because right now we're doing a series on the Book of Acts, and whenever I do a series that's tailored around a book, I try to have the readings make sense along with what we're going to be preaching through. So that means that I do alter the readings for those Sundays, but I try to whenever I do look at the lectionary readings. I try to, like, whenever it does kind of work, to just let it be and then just kind of put in my reading from Acts or whatever book I might be going through. If we're going through a book, we're not always doing a series, but just whenever that happens to be the case, then I might make some edits, or I might see if the lectionary readings kind of work out anyway.
For this series on Acts, are you going to read all of Acts, all of the verses of all of the chapters, or is it selections?
We are preaching through it one word at a time. So we're in week 2. Well, yeah, we're not gonna hit all the chapters. I've made put together some a reading plan and some other resources that I made available to the congregation to kind of help their study of it. There's some hard choices when you're doing a walkthrough of a book, especially when you get to the point of, like, this series is going to be really long if I want to hit everything. So then some chapters, I mean, it's 28 chapters, so some chapters are skipped in its entirety, and I feel the pain of that. So, for example, when we get to the end of the series, really, we're going to be diving into Acts chapter 28 to conclude, but we're not going to be covering much of Paul's awesome sea adventure. I'll try to find some ways to kind of bring people up to speed, of course, through that, but we're not going to get into, that whole thing where they're trapped in the storm and then on the island and all that stuff. That's a bit of a bummer.
Well, it is a bummer because you're doing the series, so you it's
Yeah.
your fault, buddy.
It is. It is. I bear that burden. I do.
Well,
But
it is
I
an
also feel
advantage
like,
when it's a narrative. You can fill in the stories. Be like, last week, this is what happened, and in the intervening time when you were not looking, here's what took place.
yeah, and I try to create a little bit of time to do that. It's either that or, again, we're in this for a long time, and when you preach through a book, you kind of there's a certain, I think, probably happy, like, length to it, and then after you get past that point, even as the preacher, you're like, oh, this theme again, So try to make it reasonable.
Yeah, so what's the ideal length? So I'm thinking, so I'll preach through a book in like Lent, and so 5 weeks seems to be pretty good. I could see it maybe going a little bit longer, but if you go any shorter, so like 3 weeks for Advent is kind of a nice mini series on something.
Yeah.
What's
I'm
ideal
thinking
for
about
you?
the amount of time that I've taken in Bible study to go through books, verse by verse. So for instance, Revelation was like December through September, and it was basically as long as it took. And I guess, as is often the case, Bible study feels like you have a little bit more freedom than you do in sermon. On the other hand, people do get tired of the same thing in Bible study in the same way that they might in a sermon.
Yeah, I think whatever is the best length, I would agree that it's probably different for Bible study versus sermon series. And maybe that's because the larger the group, the shorter the attention span or something like that. I don't know. But yeah. So we're doing Acts. We started on Trinity Sunday. And so we are going to be in it through the first couple weeks of September. So it is kind of a long one for me. But again, it's such a far-reaching book. And I felt like this one could be a little bit longer because, Acts has so many different movements within it. It kind of refreshes itself as the story goes on. You have, the focus on the early church, and then you have, the spotlight really shines on Stephen, and then Peter, and then you get into Paul and his different missionary journeys. So you get like different, you know, movements to it that it's when you're coming into it from Sunday to Sunday, it's like, oh, well, this is kind of new because we're learning about a new character now, and we're seeing how far the gospel is going to go and all that stuff.
So the one question is, are you a cessationist? Have the miracles stopped? Or when Paul gets bitten by a snake, are you going to do some snake handling that Sunday?
I am going to do some snake handling because I have been waiting for a really long time to finally say in front of a group of people, how did all these snakes get in this church? That's the only reason. So whatever theological term we can attach to that, I'll leave that to you, Reber. But for me, it's just for the joy of saying that.
Well, keep in mind, we can edit out this podcast, but you cannot edit in the people's minds what you say. How did all these snakes get on this church?
Yeah.
And it kind of loses its emphasis if you skip some words, if you know what I mean. Let the listener understand.
Yeah. And so that was one that I didn't want to leave in there for you.
No, that's good. It's staying in. No inappropriate words were used. So
we haven't yet had to use a bleeper. It'd be good, you know.
Do you ever watch those? I don't usually watch Jimmy Kimmel, but my favorite segment is the unnecessary censoring.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And it's great because they're not saying bad words, but makes it look like, and it's probably inappropriate, but it's comical.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Well,
hey,
go ahead. You go, Josh.
Yeah. Genesis 15. Zach, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about righteousness? You want to talk about faith? You've already said that 15 came after 14. So this is also true. 15 comes before 17, which is Paul's major argument in the book of Galatians, because 17 is circumcision. And so Luther, if you read his Galatians commentary, he hits this over and over and over again. 15 comes before 17. Abram is declared righteous even before circumcision. I guess, so here's my question, because this is a big word. We like to throw it out a lot as Lutherans. What is righteousness?
Oh, righteousness. I've always kind of come to the simple definition, I guess, that righteousness is being right before God and others. So I think about it like this, that when everything is functioning as it should, that's righteousness. And I've heard illustrations like this. This isn't something that I've created, but or I've come up with on my own. But I've heard certain people kind of refer to it as even your car starting. Your car is functioning in proper relationship to you, its owner. When you press the button, I was almost going to say turn the key, but that would make me sound old. When you press the button and it starts, it is functioning in harmony with itself as it's made to be, and also functioning with its owner and or creator potentially. Righteousness is living in right relationship, or being in right relationship with God and with people around you.
I like it. It's simple.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's great because it's parallel to and kind of fills out the way that I've often talked about, like glory. The glory of a thing is to do what it's created to do, right? So the glory of the sun is to shine on the earth and mark the times and the seasons. So then if you were going to say, what is it that man is supposed to do? It's kind of interesting because in verse 6, he believed the Lord and he counted it to him as righteousness, makes it seem as though, and this is how we often talk as Lutherans, right? That believing God, trusting God, grants you righteousness that's an alien righteousness, right? It's not your righteousness. It's God's righteousness. He's imputing it. He's reckoning it. But isn't it also true that believing God is righteousness? According to your definition, Zach, which I agree with, it's like you were created to trust God. And so when you trust God, you are carrying out righteousness.
Yeah. I think we can go back to like your illustration of the sun. So like the sun's glory is to shine on the earth. And yes, because it is doing what it's designed to do, but isn't the effect of the sun doing what it is designed to do good, and then doesn't that then testify back to the goodness of God? So then, Abraham or Abram at this point, I'm going to have trouble on this podcast. I always mess that up. I'm always calling Abraham before he's Abraham. So when I'm looking at some of these chapters, I'm always going back and forth there. And so you have that, like, Abram, he acknowledges, or he believes and receives God's word by faith. And then, of course, that faith is accounted to him as righteousness. And so you see that like, this is what God desires, and the result of it, the effect of it, is good. One of the things I think that I don't know if we always state as much, because I think sometimes when we're talking about, like, the covenants that God made, we're thinking about them theologically, we're thinking about them and its impact on the church and its impact on the story of Scripture. Every covenant that God makes is earth-shaking. It changes human history, and so this is another result of that. But what does it do? Like, it changes human history for the good of humanity, and so his descendants will number as the stars, and that they'll be a blessing to all the families of the earth. So a good God creates his people to do good things, which results in goodness all around. If any of that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense also when you think about what fractures righteousness. So it is ultimately when Adam and Eve don't believe the word of God, right? They believe instead the devil. In the day that you eat of it, you will not surely die, which is credited to them as unrighteousness, right? You could say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other interesting part here is that, go ahead.
No. Keep going. You're on a roll.
Is that, like, in making the covenant, you see, like, Abram's passivity here. Yes, he's going to bring forward the animals. He's going to cut them in half. But then when God comes in and he delivers his promises, what are Abram's works at that point? Compared to what God is doing for Abram. And so I always kind of think about that in terms of how sometimes you get into that petty argument about baptism, where it's like, yeah, but you have to decide to go up to be baptized, or parents have to bring the child forward and all that stuff. By the time we get around to God making his promises, all that we've done is nothing compared to what he is doing in giving those promises and what he's about to do as he fulfills those promises. And so then, to me, like, Genesis 15 really highlights Abram's passivity here in this moment and God's activity in giving that righteousness.
I like that you called it a petty argument, because the question is, did I decide to go to church this morning? Well, like, in a real sense, yeah, like, you decided to get up out of bed, right? The problem is when we apply the synergistic, monergistic debate to absolutely everything in life. That's such a miserable Lutheran way to live. Oh, I didn't decide to do that. Well, okay, but you did.
I mean, it's striking to me, right, the pettiness of it, because the Christian, as Luther so clearly says, like, the Christian doesn't look back and claim anything for himself. Like, so you're like, yeah, I've only done what you told me to do. I did what you made me do, essentially. You don't claim any credit. Whereas it's the unbeliever who's, like, trying to claim credit, for everything.
Right. And so, and it's that balance, and pride so easily works its way into this equation, which is really, I think what is coming out in conversations like that you might have, where these arguments come about and everything, is that, acknowledge the fact that, yep, you got up, you didn't hit snooze on your alarm too many times, and you got ready for church, you showed up, and you participated in the service, you prayed, you went to work on Monday, did everything you were supposed to do, went a little above and beyond, all of that, sure. But just understand that while you're making these choices that are good, briefly pat yourself on the back for them, tell yourself good job, let your conscience be at peace, but also understand that ultimately it's nothing. And kind of having that tension in your mind helps with the humility piece of things, but also puts everything in the proper perspective, which I guess is also humility. So probably could have just said that.
I'm shocked. Yeah, I'm reminded of two things. One from Matthew 25, sheep and the goats. The sheep are like, when did we do these things? So they're not even self-aware, right? I mean, that's what faith is. It's already always externally looking. And then is it the Large Catechism? It's some writing of Luther. It's like faith doesn't ask what good work should I be doing. It's automatically doing them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think probably one of the like bigger conclusions I've come to about how to live, a life as a justified Christian who is covered with the righteousness of Jesus is that then there's the opportunity, instead of like trying to count up like the good works and trying to figure out what's required of me, is that now I'm free to actually think about not just what is good and not just what is right, but what is actually best for my neighbor. I think that's probably one of the most exciting parts about being a Christian, is that since I'm free from keeping the score, and I'm free from trying to keep every requirement of the law for my salvation, then all of a sudden, as I turn towards my neighbor, I'm like, well, like what not only is good for them, but how can I be my best for them? Because I have the very best of things covering me in Christ's righteousness. So then, all that energy and all that, justification, frustration can be turned into what is actually beyond good or beyond just required, to be the best for my neighbor.
No, that's good, because then what happens if you overthink it and you're like measuring and stuff, then you end up saying really stupid things like good works are detrimental for salvation.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if Abraham was like the most tin cap Lutheran, I mean tin foil cap, you know what I mean, keeping I use that term all the time. Tin cap Lutheran, just basic understanding of stuff, but doesn't really get it. And God tells him to sacrifice his son, and he goes, "Wait, that would be a good work. So I'm not going to do it because I'm going to be justified." if I say no.
He's taking these animals and he's cutting them in half, and he's like, man, I couldn't. It's not half. It's not equal halves. Can't you see? Like I just didn't do it properly. Shut up! Just cut them in half.
That's right. So so just stop overthinking it. We're such head cases. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so simple, right? Believe in God and love your neighbor. The post communion collect is so good.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. Maybe that doesn't get highlighted enough, actually. Also, I was going to say that when it comes to justification and looking for the scapegoat, timing is everything. I mean, at the beginning of the journey, you don't want to be like, God, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to find that scapegoat. One still has to be provided. And so, but and when the angel says stop, well, stop. So you got to be listening.
Yeah, but Abraham was a fire truck, and he said, "Red light, don't stop me."
Quiet, angel. Can't you see I'm doing something?
That's good.
I like Abraham. Oh, okay. One language question, and this could be tedious, but do you guys like that the divine name Yahweh is translated as Lord, all capital Lord? And the reason I'm asking is because in verse 2, Abraham said, "O Lord God." And you'll notice the funny thing with the capitalization there is that it's actually God that's capitalized. So what's going on there in Hebrew, it's Adonai Yahweh. So if you stay consistent, that would be translated as Lord, Lord.
It's confusing because they're generic terms, right? Like when people hear Lord, although they're not thinking medieval knights and ladies generally, they do have some kind of an abstraction in their head and it's not a personal name. And that's the hazard, right? Same thing with God. The Muslims have this on us, at least from outside, that Allah sounds like a personal name to us. So it's like they've got their God has a name.
I mean, that's true, but that's just the Arabic word for God.
I know, but it's just like it's distinctive, right? Whereas when like one nation under God, you can fit in any number of gods in that designation, right?
So I'm not suggesting we should do it, but how do you feel about Jehovah? Like it's a made up word. Like I can't stand it, but Do you think we should use it, or should we just get people comfortable saying Yahweh?
I mean,
Is there
I
any
actually,
legitimacy to the concern about using it? Go ahead, Zach. You go ahead.
I'm going to answer your question, David. The answer is no. Now go ahead,
Okay.
Zach.
I actually did use Yahweh a bit more often in my early days of preaching. Then I found myself kind of always having to explain to people who had never heard that before, like, okay, this it means Lord, it wasn't like creating another idol for us. You're fine. But I think in a context, I think context matters a lot. I think there's certain audiences that perhaps Yahweh might be offensive to, but then there are others that it would pay to be more specific. I think within the church. I think most people know that it is a specific name. I think you just have to be aware of like when it's not specific to the people that you're talking to, you know. Yeah.
Do you know in when Jesus quotes Psalm 110, does there come through a distinction in Greek? The Lord says to my Lord. I'm curious now.
I was just thinking that of Psalm 110.
Yeah, I'll look it up here. Sit at my right hand, right? Sit at my right hand. Matthew 22. Apen kurios to kurio. The Lord says to my Lord. So the the Greek does it too. It keeps it ambiguous. Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So so the answer is it's okay. It's just there's always something behind the language that is worth exploring too.
Which is always helpful. It's always helpful pedagogically. Words are useful. Words are useful as teaching tools because there's always more going on than meets the eye, right? So for instance, we had this with anothen, right? So it's a Greek word that I wonder whether the Greek readers, speakers would have thought, oh, that's an ambiguous term and it's being used in two ways, or if it just was, but we get to do that in English. We get to talk about it that way in English,
I just like picturing these terms that are brought up. So a camel going through the eye of a needle. Hilarious. You ever picture it?
Mm-hmm.
and then Nicodemus, I gotta crawl back up my mother's womb. I mean, the Bible's so much better when you actually picture these things in your head.
I think you added a little bit to the language of it there, but
yeah, I've only ever been able to picture
That's how I read it.
Camel as a cartoon. It's about as close as I can get in my mind. Sort of like a cartoonish camel.
Like the cigarette camel.
Yeah, it's Joe Camel. That's
Is
who
it?
it is for me.
Have I been thinking of Joe Camel this whole time?
That's the only cartoon camel out there.
So what he really meant was a cigarette going through a needle, which, okay,
that's possible.
That's still pretty impressive.
Yeah. Honestly, I'd say stay away from both. But
Zach, I got a question for you.
Anti-tobacco.
You talked about it. Speaking of smoke, right? We got this these animals cut in half here.
Yes.
What's the deal? What's going on?
All right, can I just celebrate the fact that I just rendered
me.
Josh speechless? Okay. All right. So yeah, that's in the latter half of the chapter there, and so it kind of scroll down here a little bit so I can see what I'm talking about as I'm talking to you about it. That usually helps, doesn't it? And so yeah, you have that. Couple things are going on. I mean, you have first of all that. The sum of what Abram is called to gather there becomes essentially, 8 pieces. So, as we go through the chapter there, looking at verses 7 to 10, you have that Abram is called to bring together a heifer that's 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Now, that actually only equates to 5 until, of course, you look at how, like, the heifer, the goat, and the ram are all going to be cut in half. But the turtle dove and the young pigeon are not cut in half. And so then, obviously, I think maybe you have, like, sort of a foundation here being laid for an important number in the Bible, which is 8. 8 then comes to symbolize a whole lot for us, new creation, covenant, resurrection, all of that stuff, fulfillment of God's promises, even you could probably throw in there. One thing I've always wondered about, though, is that so you asked me to take you through it. Maybe I should do that before I get into the questions. So you have that these animals are cut in half,
Whatever you want.
and um, and so and then you have like this very strange vision where after Abram has gathered all the animals that he has cut in half, with the exception of the turtle dove and the pigeon, that God appears as the sun was going down, and a deep sleep fell on Abram. That's verse 12. And this is where it gets even weirder. And behold, a dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. A dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. You would think at this moment that the villain of the story is about to appear, that all of a sudden Satan is interrupting the party, but nope, that's actually God. And so here in this chilling scene, God appears. And then, God speaks to Abram. So just to kind of take it back up to the beginning for just a second, the beginning of Genesis 15, you have that God, appears to Abram and calls himself his shield and very great reward. And there's a couple things we could say about that. I'm going to hold off on that for now. But then, Abram sort of pushes back. And this is the first dialogue, unless if I'm missing something, I think this is right. This is the first dialogue that Abram is having with God. Before this, it's all one-way conversation. And so when God appears in Genesis 12, and then after that, God is reiterating his promises, but I believe Abram is silent through all of those. And then this is the first conversation. And isn't that amazing that the first conversation that Abram has with God is, okay, fine, nice, but I have no kids, which is his reply to God's gracious introduction to that conversation. I am your shield, your very great reward. Cool. Where's the baby? And so this actually kind of like opens up like the way that within covenant prayer is often going to work. And I love how realistic this is, that, that there's Abram boldly pushing back against God. And maybe there's another time as you go through Genesis, you'll see God, I don't know, bargaining, or Abram bargaining with God a little bit. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But you have that, there's this pushback all of a sudden to this promise. And then God provides the reassurance. And then to further it, he cuts the covenant with Abram. And so how does God respond then to Abram's pushback? He reveals more of who he is. And so then you have that, he gathers the animals, cuts them in half, and then all of a sudden God appears in the middle of this dreadful and great darkness. And so you have that unapproachable yet approachableness of God at this point. That after Abram's pushback, here is God. And then, God speaks and says, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs. And so he'll reiterate the promise, but he also delivers something that's a little bit new to this point, that they're going to be slaves for 400 years. And he'll bring judgment on the nation that they serve. So I'm guessing that this darkness that God is bringing is a little taste, of course, of the terror and plague that the people of Egypt will experience later on. Strangely, this is, comfort, but also something that probably brings fear to Abram, or at least it would bring fear to me. I mean, we don't, and I could be reading, obviously we don't know how Abram felt in this moment, but I think it's safe to guess that he probably wasn't comfortable. And, here I am standing between dead animals, and it's dark, it's chilling, and all of a sudden, there's God once again talking to me. And then, the promise continues.
Just a note about that. Oh, sorry, real quick. Just a note. I noticed that in the Septuagint, the substantive there is fear, and it's not a great darkness. It's a great dark fear fell on Abram, which is really interesting. That comes through in the KJV. Lo, a horror of great darkness fell on him. So yeah, I'm inclined to think that we do know how he feels, and it's not good, like you said.
Yeah,
he's terrified.
Yeah, that's a question too, isn't it? Then, like, the way that it is translated in English there, I didn't go back and check that, but yeah, that is really interesting. And so, so now you've got me running on that for a second. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
So then
that's good.
Yeah. Then verse 15, as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. They shall come back here in the fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So kind of a little note there. I think it's suggested that the Amorites are named specifically out of all the potential nations that God could have named, because there's more than one dwelling in Canaan at this time. Probably the Amorites are the standout, either in terms of strength or wickedness, or I would argue, or I would guess, both. And that tends to be how it goes, right? The strongest do seem also to be the most wicked. Egypt is going to provide a prime example of that in just a little bit. But anyway, so then again, you have the sun. It said when the sun had gone down and it was dark. So the darkness is clear that Abram was experienced earlier is from the presence of the Lord. Now we have this natural darkness, and there's a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between the pieces. And so then again, the promise of the land, and then you have the naming of others that possess the land. To kind of like run back through a couple things that sort of stick out here, is that, first of all, you have this, we could go with a lot of places, but maybe just starting in verse 17, the flaming torch. Here you have, again, God's presence for the first time being associated with fire, maybe with the exception of the cherubim that have the flaming sword in Eden. And so this, of course, becomes sort of foundational for how the people of Israel are going to see God. He's going to appear to them in the future with the presence of fire. He's going to appear to Moses in Exodus 3 as a burning bush. He's going to appear on Mount Sinai, and before that as a pillar of fire. And he's going to appear on Mount Sinai with fire and smoke and everything else. So this is going to be, foundational for the presence of God, that he's revealing himself, as, yes, or associating himself, I should say in this case, with fire. And then...
And hey, real quick, you have the cloud by day with the smoke. So you have fire and cloud already right here.
Yeah, good. And so, and then you have, again, there's that curious, kind of working backwards now, verse 16, you have that curious statement that the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. They haven't filled up the cup of wrath enough yet, I guess. I think there is, you can ask a lot of questions about that verse. I think probably one thing you can say about it is that it's not as if God is saying, well, their sins aren't bad enough yet. Instead, I think it's God revealing his patience that would lead, hopefully, the Amorites to repentance, even though we know that's not going to happen, and God knows that's not going to happen. But he's consistent to himself in his character. God is patient. And so he's revealing that a little bit. But also, who's going to be used to punish the Amorites? Israel. And so then you have that God is raising up for this people, or God is raising up for himself through Abraham, a people who will bring judgment upon the earth. He will work through them to do that, which, has, sort of some eschatological implications for us, that, that we will reign with Christ, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of go a long way with that one too. Again, there's a lot that's foundational in here. I could pause. You guys got any questions for me or anything you're thinking about?
Well, David, you're gonna love this. So speaking of the first, dialogue that Abraham has with God, it's the epistemological question.
Yeah.
So he says, "How am I to know?" That's great because it is foundational, and the answer, of course, is signs. So Luther's really good on this. He's like, God always gives a sign: 2 trees, animals, fire by day, cloud by night, or inverse of that. But,
It is striking, too, that, so Abraham has this conversation with God directly. So he hears God's voice and still wonders, how shall I know? Which points up for me the nature of the flesh, right? The unbelief that it adheres in our flesh. And also the vanity of people who imagine that, if only God would speak to me, then I would believe. Or like the rich man in in Hades, if you sent Lazarus back, they would believe. Well, the problem is not like for lack of clarity. God makes things clear. Here he attests with signs. But the problem is not ultimately that God is unclear. It's just that you don't believe him, and more importantly, you don't want to believe him, right? And so that's the distinction, isn't it, between, like, say, Abram here, who asks, "How shall I know?" which calls to mind, for instance, the contrast between Zechariah and Mary, right? We just read this last night in our home for devotions. He asks, "How shall I know?" Zechariah asks, "How shall I know?" Or "How can this be?" And Gabriel says, "I stand in the counsel of God, and because you didn't believe me, you're going to be mute." When Mary asks exactly the same question, but she's not asking it being dominated by the flesh, right? Abram asks this question not dominated by the flesh, which means that then when God gives the sign, like to Gideon, when God gives him the sign, it serves the purpose of bolstering his faith, right? As opposed to being something that's putting God to the test.
Yeah, this is great. So it's okay to ask questions.
Right. And that, perfect, because that's, of course, you think about how kids work. We have this conversation in my home all the time. Because kids are learning. Your kids are always learning to temper their rebellious nature, right? So there's two ways you can ask me why I told you to do this thing. And one of the ways you can ask me why should I take out the garbage is, "You're stupid, Dad. Why should I do that thing? That's dumb," right? That's one way you can ask why. And the other way would be like, "Of course I'll take out the trash, but I'm curious because it doesn't look like it's full. Why should I take it out right now? There must be a good reason. I just don't know what it is," right? Those are two very different ways of asking the question.
And consider the way that, God appears here. And yet, he's still like, "Okay, but tell me more." And so I think God might actually be better at inviting questions than we are sometimes. And I think, again, isn't this like the character of faith, that and maybe it's all the more appropriate that Abram's faith is highlighted here in verse 6, that, he did believe. It was counted to him as righteousness. And see how he asks these questions of God, maybe we're also seeing, in the story, a way for ourselves to interact with God too.
Yeah, no, that's good. Zach, big picture covenant thing, what's going on? So ultimately, do you think the symbolism of this covenant is God is binding Abraham to the land? Because that's the question, right? How am I to know that I shall possess it, namely the land? He's binding him to the land by cutting something up, by blood. So he's taking things apart and then bringing them back together. So this is, you've already alluded to Adam and Eve, right? So deep sleep. God causes Adam to go into deep sleep, pulls out of Adam a part of his body, and then reunites them in one flesh. So you got the cutting apart and then joining back together. So same thing with the land here. He's going to cut it apart. So Abram is going to be separated from the land, right? They're going to be sojourners in it for, 400 years, which, by the way, the counting begins when Isaac begins to be weaned in chapter 21. That's the way the math has to work, because they're not actually slaves in Egypt for 400 years. That's only about 215 years. So that's interesting that it begins with his son who came from his body. So Socratic question, do you buy it?
I do. And actually, as I was looking over this before, we started talking here, one question that came to mind, is, so you have that the animals are cut in half, and so there's that separation, and here you have, this phrase that, a covenant was cut, but also, the word, covenant itself, kind of whenever you look at it, and I've got to do some more looking into this because I only came across this not too long ago. It was about 1:00 to be exact. But some of the
AM or PM?
Yeah, it was PM because that was when I was awake. And so I think if you look back at the word covenant itself, it doesn't have something to do with clasping or binding. So you're cutting a binder. And so I'm wondering, as you talk about, the rib from Adam and all that I'm visualizing the animals being cut apart, and what is mingling from either half on the ground beneath the feet of the Lord there, but the blood of that animal. What's still marks these things as one, or what still connects these two halves together, but the blood. And so, and I don't know if I'm going too far with that or not, if I'm just kind of like reading too deeply between the lines, because there's nothing that really highlights that. So this is maybe some conjecture on my part, but I wonder then, when we're thinking about, like, again, what binds us to Christ, what binds us to each other, what bound Adam and Eve into that initial oneness? Well, blood, you know. And so, anyhow, I don't know how much further you can go with a thought like that, but maybe that's the visual.
Do you think Adam bled when God opened up his side, took out the rib?
Yeah, there had to be some blood involved.
How else could it happen? Yeah, you would have to think so. I'd never thought of it before. Huh.
That's a good thought. I'm not going to accuse you, Zach, of being a medieval allegorist at this point.
At this point, am I on watch?
You should try harder, Zach.
I'm on allegorist watch.
They were crazy, but they had more fun.
They did. I mean, they could do anything. They could really do anything. I mean, these are biblical supermen. I mean, just, wow. I never thought of that, nor would I have, but here's the allegory. That's
right. The main reason why I don't like rectilinear hermeneutics is because it's boring. I mean, I think it's wrong, but that's a secondary reason for it.
Yeah. Always be interesting.
Boredom is a devilish thing. I'm convinced of it. That's one of the first consequences of the fall into the sin. Is everybody got bored? Come on, let's get it. There's so much to be excited about.
I used to think of being bored as a neutral emotion until I had kids, and then I realized that when you're bored, it's probably because something's wrong with you. Mm-hmm. The world's exciting. Go read a book.
That's good advice. Is that your autobiography title, Zach?
I hope I could live up to that advice. I hope I could.
The epitaph on his grave.
Stop being bored. Go read a book. Yeah. I like it. Solid.
That's good. Huh. Very good. Anything else from Genesis 15 that you think we should talk about here, Josh? Anything else that caught your eye?
It is significant that Abram's got to wait, 4 centuries. Like, he believes God. And then there's the patient part of it. And this is what we're called to, too. Because ultimately Christ doesn't come back yet. And it could be 400 years. Could be 4 days. But there's always an element of patience.
Yeah. You think about how superhuman that is. Seeing as how difficult it is for people to wait even within their lifetime for something that they will see. And so how much harder is it to wait for something that you will not see, right? I was just thinking about Hebrews 11, right? Having not received the things promised, but having seen and greeted them from afar, they were looking for they were desired a better country, a heavenly one. So Abraham, I mean, that's great too, because it's like he's got this promise of the land possessed by all these Canaanites, but he also has a promise of an eternal home. And so it's like, which tempers everything, right?
Well, yeah, what does Jesus say in John 8? So he's not even only thinking about the land. Jesus says, Abraham saw my day and was glad.
Right, yeah, right. Yeah. Short-sightedness.
So, yeah.
That's a real problem.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So what are your questions for, like, your family or your congregation? Like, are you asking this question? What are we doing today to keep this altar here in 100 years?
Yeah.
I do I do talk about that in terms of, like, thinking back to the building, the cornerstone says 1918. And those people who built the building evidently were not thinking just about their lifetime. Otherwise, they wouldn't have built such a solid building, right? They would have built something that only needed to last for their lifetime. And that's very worthy of imitation.
If only they knew the cancerous effects of asbestos.
Look, you just got to cover it up. That's all you got to do is just tile over it.
It's like, well, Jesus says it's unquenchable, so we might as well use it.
I wonder if any of the seminarians at that time were like, "Hey, look, it says asbestos."
It's
good.
As my favorite professor would say when he was translating, and look there, it was an asbestos fire.
Excellent.
Zach, are you reading anything fun? How was camp? You can answer both those questions.
Okay. Yeah. So camp was good. We got up. So we just spent Monday through Friday up there at Lutheran Island Camp, and got to see all the renovations that were done. And so most of what's left to do is just like landscaping stuff and praying that the kids don't trample the grass that they're trying to grow back that was, tore up by the heavy equipment that had to roll through the yard at different places. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. Monday, it was just like March weather. It was cold. We were all in hoodies, and my kids were disappointed in me. They wanted me to swim in the ice cold lake. And the older I get, though, I don't know. I just don't want to swim in cold water. So I watched them, and I was fine. But then as the week went on, it got hotter. It was a good time. We got back on Friday and spent a little time stranded on the side of I-94 due to an alternator that just decided to retire on us. So that was a little bit of fun, but we got back safe and sound. One sign that the world is not made for large families anymore is whenever you need to get a tow and there's 7 of you, and how do you get all of them off the interstate? But fortunately for us, the answer was 2 tow trucks. And so we got a repair done surprisingly quick in Sauk Center, and a member of the congregation graciously came and took half my family back to Sauk Rapids, and I was able to drive the rest back about an hour or so later. So it was really thankful for that.
Hey, how do you decide when you're splitting up half your family? So for Jacob, it's really easy. I'm going to send Leah's kids out in front to meet Esau, but all of your children are from one wife. So how do you decide? Is it age or is it preference?
Interpersonal dynamics. And so we wanted to send, we definitely wanted the 2-year-old to go home. We definitely wanted a group, including that 2-year-old, of people that would get along. So we were looking at that point of possibly having my wife Tracy come back and get me in Sauk Center, which is where we were. And if that's the case, then we definitely needed the older children to be able to watch Mikey while Tracy got me and the boys, the other boys besides Mikey. So that's kind of how we made that decision. Was
Sounds
who
like
gets along
just
the
like
best.
a Sudoku puzzle you've solved there. That's good.
Yeah, there was a lot of solving that day. I'm just glad it all worked out. The first one was, how do I get over off the road here safely? And then that was one thing, and then the tow trucks was another, and getting a ride, and yeah. Anyway, so other things. Books. So I'm actually reading a book called Confessions of a French Atheist. The guy's name is hard to pronounce who authored it, so I'm not going to try to pronounce it. But the book title, which can get you far enough if you want to find out more, so look for that, and then a name that's hard to pronounce, and you've got the book I'm talking about. I
believe it's pronounced Camus, Albert Camus.
Isn't it Camus? No. And so you have that. This guy who kind of is telling a story of conversion to Christianity, living the French lifestyle. He was an athlete and very interested in women, and sometimes he goes too far into the telling of his relationships than I care for him to go. But anyway, so kind of mixes in a little bit of his life story and the overcoming of his philosophy of life as he encountered a pastor that sort of led him through his questions. So that's kind of where I am with it so far. I don't know how it ends, except for the fact that apparently he does become Christian eventually. So there's that. There's a book called Dead Water that I'm reading too, one of my summer fun dumb reads. And so it's kind of a mystery suspense thing. C.A. Fletcher, really good writer. The goodest at writing the words. Very good.
This French guy, his last name looks like a cut of steak.
It does.
I figured you would be looking this up.
Filet mignon.
Yeah. So that guy. How do you pronounce that?
Hey, you want to hear my?
Anybody want to get that go?
David just said it right. Is it being?
Yeah, it's Guillaume. That's how I'd call it.
So yeah, GB.
You want to hear my French? You want to hear my French story? And this is interpersonal dynamics between district presidents. Ooh. So I have I love defunct sports teams memorabilia. So I own a baseball hat for the Montreal Expos, and it's a good laugh. They don't play anymore, and so our district president Brady Finnern sees it and starts telling me about all of his favorite Montreal Expos growing up because he loved watching it. Meanwhile, we're at the convention, and Heath Curtis, now president of Southern Illinois, sees my Expos hat, and he starts talking to me in French.
That's good. That's really good.
So that's the difference between Brady Finnern and Heath Curtis.
There's a lot to think about in that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I like it.
As to which one I prefer, I like RDP.
I think you need a little bit. I think you need a little bit of both. There's room for both kinds of DP in our COP.
You do. I was drinking Perrier a couple weeks ago, and the German professor who came to St. Cloud, I brought him a bottle. So you definitely need both, but you need to balance it off with some real baseball too. Yeah, that's true. That's good.
Yep. Somebody's actually got to be hitting the ball. That needs to happen.
That's right.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us, Zach. This is nice to get a taste of Holy Cross.
Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me. This was fun.
Do you guys have a big celebration on September 14th or what?
We have a church picnic on September 14th.
Annually?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing something. There's like some context there. Why September 14th?
It's Holy Cross. It's Holy Cross Day.
It is Holy Cross Day. Okay. Yep. And so I hadn't dialed up my church events calendar with my liturgical calendar in that moment. But yeah, it is Holy Cross Day. You're welcome, guys. You feel free to celebrate us as well.
I mean, that sounds like it'd be a great circuit
I do.
event, to be honest. Get the whole circuit to celebrate Holy Cross that day. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Wow, great idea. Yeah, you're on your way out the door. Hey guys, here's what you should do.
There's more where that came from.
Even that you would give that even that much time, I thank you.
A special place.
We'll try to
in
be
my
worthy
heart
of the celebration. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, hey, thanks. This was fun.
I'm gonna click stop.